Hello everyone, Morgie right here again. Today we are just talking about some not exactly horror stories, but stories that my friends who have both played and run TTRPGs have run into over the years, and I thought it would be just kind of interesting to share them. I myself have been very lucky. I have not had too many horror stories in my D&D career. I had one miscommunication at the very beginning of me running a game. That was my mistake, and some hurt feelings happened, but we got through it. So I would not really consider that a horror story. Just more of an issue that I had grow out of as a DM. So I asked 3 of my friends to share stories that they had run into. So for my first friend, her story is, I was in a group fighting a pack of rabid wolves, and my character was super empathetic to animals. She was a ranger, so she didn't want to hurt them, and instead tried to talk them down. They were rabid, unknowingly, and the DM had secretly ruled them as such because of outside influence. The other player, who had been surrounded, got ripped apart, and his character died horribly. Everyone at the table was silent, and the other player had to roll a new character. So, a very awkward thing, fairly early in a campaign that she was in, and she added some context after the fact that her boyfriend was actually running this game, so he was the one who actually killed this player character, and it was a very awkward period of time. So, just to add my 2 cents to this, as a DM or GM, you sometimes feel that you have a story to tell, and your players try to do something, and sometimes things just aren't possible. And that's fine. But the thing you have to keep in mind is you have to make this clear to the players. You have, in this case, the DM/GM probably should have made clear that there was no point in trying to make friends with these wolves and not kill them, that they were beyond help. If that had been made clear, that player character might not have had to die. So, yeah. But again, these are mistakes all DMs and GMs can make, but it does make the situation very tense at the table and can ruin the experience for someone if you're not careful. So it's always something to keep in mind. For the second story, this is from another one of my friends, and they have 2 longer stories. In the first game, the DM was new to DMing 5e and preferred the older editions. He felt some of the 5e rules were too easy on players. The world was very rich in lore, and the campaign was a giant sandbox, but there was no clear goal. No major threats. Myself and 3 other players were new to D&D, and with the addition of a lot of hardcore rules, spell slots taking a week to recover, food being something heavily tracked, etc., it was a slog to progress with no clear goal or direction at times. The DM brought in other players, and I think the total at the table was maybe 7 or 8 people by the time it was over. In one session, we brute forced a puzzle that was meant for the mid or late game, and the DM had me roll in a loot table, and I ended up with 3 legendary items. Outside the game, the DM was worried that he shouldn't have given the items out. So I offered that we could sell 2 and damage the 3rd so it could be repaired later. We sold and traded 2 of the items so we could get a guild hall for a large group. Everybody seemed happy, but then the game went right back to the sandbox log. I personally got frustrated with the damaged item. When I tried to repair it, I went into a dream where I met what I guess was supposed to be the soul of the item. It wanted me to do something, and despite several good rolls and trying whatever I could to get something to happen, nothing did. I couldn't repair anything, and I couldn't leave the dream until I got the correct solution. I don't know what happened in the end, but all I remembered is being frustrated and felt I had wasted time for nothing. I honestly felt like a fool while the other 6 players were enjoying what they were doing. At some point, another friend listened in on a session and messaged myself and 2 other people saying that the way the game was being run was very odd. The other 2 players confirmed, and after a brief conversation, it was agreed that we should approach the DM after the session. Good practice. The problem is that when we approached, it ended up being just me. I still feel the silence when the DM asked if anyone else had any issues. The game did change a little after, but the DM ended up dropping a couple sessions later. I left feeling like I ruined D&D for my DM, and I had left a bad taste in the mouths of several of our friends. Me and the DM are good now, but I think I always feel guilty about that game. Maybe I should have just silently bowed out. Now, my friend is a very sweet lady, tends to blame herself for a lot of things that are not her fault. And in this situation, it seemed that she had tried many options. She had done everything she could. She tried to mitigate the legendary items. She tried to speak to the DM and waited till other players had the same issues so they could all speak to them together. And it sounds like the other two players abandoned her when she went to approach the DM. I don't think it was her fault at all. I think that the DM was maybe a little oversensitive to criticism, which criticism, unfortunately, is something that you have to accept as a DM or a GM of a TTRPG because it is a collaborative game. You are all working together to tell a story, so everybody should have a say within reason of adjustments that need to be made, and the DM and GMs should be open to that as long as it doesn't completely destroy their fun or their idea of what game they want to run. And this is all something that also needs to be, if you have a session 0, this is all something that can be fixed and worked out beforehand. And you can also have follow-up session 0s later to just kind of do a check-in and see how everything is doing. So I don't think my friend was at all at fault for this. It sounded like they tried to mitigate things and make things easier, and it kind of fell apart, but I don't think it was their fault. For my friend's second story, they said, the first was a sandbox with no main story, but this one was a zip line attached to a railroad that only went in one direction with no bends in the track. I remember writing a creative backstory told through a series of lab reports, and none of it was used or even looked at, honestly. The DM was writing a book and based the game on said book. Uh-oh, that's always a bad sign. At the time, they said any backstory was fine, but didn't use any of them from anyone. This was for 4 players this time. We started as a group selected from a lottery to travel and be heroes. There was no explanation on why our characters would enter said lottery, and we had no control over where we were going. The DM would also describe the NPCs like they were characters from a novel, down to extreme details on clothes and such. We got a few sessions in when we came across an illegal magical creature auction. I reasoned that my character and backstory didn't like the creatures being in cages, so we set them free. I could feel the DM lost a lot of control of the session. Props to him for still running with it. Sadly, the next session was a hiatus as the DM wanted to focus on their writing, and we never came back, and now I have 2 games where I felt like I made the DMs quite upset. So, again, I don't think this is an issue. When you are a DM, you do have a story that you are trying to tell with your group, and you do come up with the main story, but you have to keep in mind that it is a collaborative story. So you should take in part of your characters' backstories and try to weave them into the narrative that you already have. That might require a little bit of the changing of the narrative that you're working on. The writing a campaign based on a book is a very common trope with problem DMs. And the problem with that is they tend to have it very set in stone about how they want it to go. But the thing with that is that D&D is not a book. D&D is collaborative. D&D is improvisation. And things aren't going to go the way that you have them planned out. That's just the way it works. No TTRPG is like a book. That's the fun of them, is that they are improvisational. They are spontaneous. Like, crazy stuff can happen due to a bad dice roll or due to a player doing something that, is not ruining the game, but just not what you're expecting as a DM. This has happened to me multiple times, and I've had to adjust my story multiple times and sometimes just throw out all things entirely because it didn't work. It wasn't important to the characters or, didn't matter. So it's just something you have to deal with as a DM or a GM and eventually grow out of, wanting you to have this strict story that you're basing it on. And it's good to be a good writer as a DM. I have a problem personally with NPC dialogue. All my NPCs, the bad guys, end up sounding like bad corporate CEOs. Because I'm not very good at coming up with bad guys' voices on the spot. But it's just something that you have to kind of deal with. And if your players throw you with a loop, it's good that this GM was able to roll with it in that session, but it sounded like it kind of took the wind out of their sails for the rest of the campaign, and they gave up on it and started writing, which is fine because that's what it sounded like they wanted to do. But again, I don't think my friend is at fault here. I think that the GM did not entirely understand what being a GM DM is supposed to be, what your role is supposed to be. You are supposed to be the guide, you are supposed to be the referee for rules, and you are supposed to be the person that steers the ship, but everybody else is doing other things on the ship as well. So, I don't know why this turned into wind in the sails and ship references. I guess it's because my campaign is all ships and things, but anyway. For the last story, or last bunch of short stories, this is from my personal DMGM. If I've mentioned her before, she's the one who did the dream sequence that all went crazy. She is a very good GM/DM. She has her own couple of podcasts and an Instagram account. Her name is Spacetime Traveler. She has one that Hindsight is Natural 20, and another one that is Chaotic Good Conversations. So if you want to check those out, they're very fun. I'm on a couple of episodes, not to toot my own horn. She has a couple of, like, not really horror stories, but just situations that were very awkward that she ran into. The first one is that she joined a new online group and they were doing a session 0, and then session 1 got canceled because the DM guy broke his back apparently, and she never heard from anyone again, which is unfortunate. Just bad luck. No one is at fault in this story. It's just more like, oh, I'm finally joining in a game and I'm very excited to play, and then this unfortunate outside thing happens, and that happens a lot. And if you were in pain, it's not very easy for you to run a D&D game. And then related to that first campaign, there was another player in that game that never happened, but during the session 0, there was someone who was very into dragons, and if my GM space is saying that someone is very into dragons, that's saying a lot because she also loves dragons. She always has dragons somewhere in her campaigns. But this person very seriously told us not to joke about dragons and rage quit chat after he introduced his character, and someone in this group laughed at him a little. So, yeah, that player sounds like probably wouldn't have been a good fit for this particular group. I'm not sure what the details are there. I was a little afraid to ask. Yeah. No matter how, at least in my experience, no matter how serious your D&D campaign is for drama, you're always gonna start making jokes because that's what people do to alleviate tension, to, relate to other people. You reference things that are happening to pop culture. It's just a very normal thing that people do in situations like that. So someone who's taking things so seriously like that is probably not a great group. It's not nice that the other player laughed at their character description. You shouldn't laugh at someone's character description that they put a lot of work into, but I think that person might have been setting themselves up to fail a little bit. Okay, and then for the other two little short anecdotes that Space had is that there was a DM that very cliched situation with bad DMs. Every tavern owner was like a high-level retired adventurer and aggroed against the players every time they tried to do something out of the ordinary. So that's sadly a big trope with bad DMs, is that no, don't try to do anything to the NPCs because they're all extremely powerful and they'll kick your butt. So it's annoying. Yes, you can probably pull that once or twice in a campaign if as a character that you're like actually is supposed to be an important NPC and is very powerful, but you can't do it for every single NPC in the world because why is anything bad happening in the world if every single normal person is incredibly powerful? So, and it just sounds like a DM who wants to shut down the player's fun most of the time. Like, yes, sometimes players can do annoying things, but sometimes they're just trying to play the game and the DM is shutting them down with these high-level NPCs, and that's no fun. And then the last one, which said not particularly a horror story, but had a DM who was just basically storytelling to us versus letting us play and drive the story. And she fell asleep multiple sessions due to the DM just talking constantly. So that's another one of those telling a story over making sure your players are having fun. It's an unfortunate situation, but it does happen quite frequently. It's another trope of either newbie or GMs that don't really understand the collaborative parts of D&D or other TTRPGs. So that's unfortunate, but none of these are very terrible horror stories. They sometimes hurt feelings were left, sometimes things got awkward, but these are more common things that might happen in normal D&D games or TTRPG games where the group and the GM or the group and other players aren't a great fit together. And when you are looking for a group to play with, it does take time. Does take time to find a group that's going to work together, that's going to have fun together, that's going to have the same vibes as each other. And it's just a part of it. It's the same as like working at a job together. Not everybody gets along, but maybe you find a way to work well together. And that's kind of how D&D works. Sometimes people who are your best friends in real life are not going to be good D&D friends, and that's fine. That's just how different relationships work. But anyway, that's the end of this today. I hope you enjoyed these very mild horror stories, or maybe just concerning stories of D&D, of my friends. And check out my other videos, like and subscribe, and I hope you're having a great day. And if you're not having a great day, I hope your bad day is over with soon. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.